it's interesting because my boyfriend had brought the show up like like before we'd started rewatching it, and I was like talking about like going out or something, and he's like, "You can't do that. I know what happens to guys like you. I've seen Queer as Folk." And I just thought that was so funny. I texted my friend immediately. I was like, Charles just said this.
Want to listen to this Ivory Tower Boiler Room or True Crime and Academia episode ad-free? Head on over to our Patreon and join either the ITBR student or the ITBR professor level. Both levels of membership have a 7-day free trial. With the ITBR professor level, you also not only get access to all of our video episodes, like listening or watching Scream Part 2, you also get access to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room and True Crime and Academia book clubs. The book clubs are going to each be a 1-hour private Zoom. I'm hosting the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Mary DePippi's hosting the True Crime and Academia ones. So with the ITBR professor level, you get access to all of our video and audio episodes, plus our book clubs. And make sure you download the Patreon app on your phone for such an accessible, easy to use way to consume our content. Okay, can't wait to see you all on Patreon.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Hi, this is Dr. Andrew Rimby, and before you hear such an exciting episode, I want to remind you all that when I'm not here hosting the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, I am running my small business, the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, where I am consulting with clients. It includes academic writing consulting, social media, podcast, and expanding your media footprint. So, I have clients I'm working on graduate school writing with them. I can work on thesis writing, dissertation writing, essay advice, college admission essays, undergrad, college advice, graduate school advice. I also am working on a client's small business right now and expanding her social media footprint. I can work on how to create a podcast with you or how to expand your podcast audience. I also can just help you expand your media footprint in general. So, if you're interested in my consulting, I first want to let you all know it is only $30 for the first hour that I work with you on consulting, and then I'll set up a package with you then. So you can email me at ivorytowerboilerroom@gmail.com, or you could go to our Patreon, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room, and there's a consulting option under memberships. You can pay the $30 and then I will reach out to you right away and we'll set up a consultation. And then while you're on our Patreon, make sure you join the Ivory Tower Boiler Room and the True Crime and Academia Book Club. Every month, both myself and Mary are choosing books for our book club members to read. And we are actually polling our members on Patreon to see what books they want to read. And we're meeting with them the first week of each month. So if you want to join the book club each month, just make sure that you join on Patreon. That way I know who's joined and I can reach out to all of you and let you know when we're meeting on Zoom. Okay, so lots of things to do here in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, and I can't wait to consult with you, join you for a book club discussion, and have you here listening to one of our podcast episodes. Okay, enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Welcome back to the ITBR Rewatches Queer as Folk, Episode 4. Just a reminder before I introduce my exciting guest here today. Episode 3, if you haven't listened to it, it's out. That was called No Bris, No Shirt, No Service. And episode 4 is called Ted's Not Dead. It aired on December 17, 2000 in the United States. Um, and was written by Richard Kramer and directed by Kevin Inch. So I'll read the synopsis when my guest joins me, but I'm so excited because my guest here is someone who I've always looked to on social media, Joe Nasta, who is a queer writer, who I've learned is a mariner. Who's based in Seattle, Washington. And I know that Joe's going to open up regarding the work um, that I think your pronouns, we should get into it just because I'm even thinking, Joe, how do I, use the correct pronouns? But Joe's pronouns are Z and Zer. So would it be their work that you do?
Yeah, Zerwork. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm reframing my mind here. Um, But what work are you currently doing? Because I know you're working in an exciting zine environment.
Yeah, so I curate a zine. It's just a digital zine. It's called Stone Pacific, stonepacificzine.com. We just seek to highlight unconventional artists and writers, um, sometimes with ties to the Pacific Northwest, but also from all over the world, and just give um, space for people to feature their work, writing and different types of art. So it's cool.
Yeah. Well, and Joe has an MFA, um, or
No, I
you
don't.
started your MFA.
Yeah, I started my MFA, but I dropped out.
Okay, well, you know, you dabbled in an MFA in creative writing and poetics, but Joe always is publishing poetry. Um, and if you want to plug your Instagram, now's a good time because so many of your poems are always featured on your Instagram. But um, Joe's work has been published in The Rumpus, Yes Poetry, Pigeonholes. Um, yeah, all over the place. So I think your Instagram is what? At
It's Rafflecopter McGee.
Okay. So ROFLCOPTER Mickey. Okay, so Rafflecopter Mickey.
Yeah.
Joe, welcome. I'm so excited to have a poetic mind. Every guest here has always been so different in Queer as Folk. So, you know, my I've had mostly queer men, but I'm expanding it to the queer like community in general. I might have a straight ally join eventually, which will be an interesting experience. Um, but first, if you could just like explain your pronouns because I've heard of Z and Zer. I don't really know a lot about it. Like, how did that enter into your world and like how you identify?
Yeah, so I identify as agender. Um, so I just kind of settled on some pronouns that were more unconventional and didn't really immediately signify a gender. I mean, I present really masculine and in like day-to-day life, most people would just assume that I use he, him pronouns, which I don't really like give anyone a hard time, especially because most people aren't that familiar with like Caesar. So it's like it's not that big a deal, but um yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's so interesting and um a good chance of just opening up about like what we get in episode 4. So let me read the synopsis. So I always say everyone's task here. I have all these notes for episode 4. Not that every other guest didn't have an exciting episode to cover, but we have a whammy and a doozy. Like I feel that episode 4 is the ultimate climax. Like we're really gearing up for a lot in this plot points that
Mhm.
happen in this episode. But okay, so Ted's not dead, which I think is just an interesting title for the episode.
Mhm.
Because I feel like there's so much more going on than just that title. So it says while Ted lies in a drug-induced coma, Brian learns he's named the executor of his friend's living will. Also, Justin's mother suspects the truth about about her son's sexuality. And Michael and Emmett try to remove incriminating evidence from Ted's apartment, but discover Ted's longtime crush on Michael. Okay, so that's our like artificial intelligence, you know, basic summary, but there's so much that that summary doesn't even cover. So I always ask every guest, Joe, when did you first discover the 2000 Queer as Folk?
So I watched it, I think in like 2012,
Okay.
which is when I was in college. So I was at the Merchant Marine Academy watching
Yeah,
Queer.
shout out to Long
Yeah,
Island.
I was in my room just watching binge watching Queer as Folk. I honestly didn't even remember that much. I've been rewatching it and I'm like, dang, like I watched all this. I have no memory. So it's been exciting to revisit it. Especially because I was younger then. I was 18 and now I'm 29. So you definitely have a different perspective like 9 or 10 years later to look back on something like that. So
Yeah. Well, and I'm just curious, what was it like you actually um looking at such erotic queer material at the Merchant Marine Academy? Like, were you nervous that you were watching it with all, I mean, is it still the Merchant Marine Academy? Is it still all men, male identifying people, or is it
no, so
mixed?
there's women. I think there's been female midshipmen since like the 70s.
Okay.
So it's not all men, but I mean I had male roommates, obviously, which most people are pretty cool and don't really care what anyone else is doing. I did have like one roommate who like really was homophobic, and would be pretty vocal about it with people, but for the most part no, like everyone is really nice. And when I was there, like all the service academies were setting up like spectrum clubs, so like sort of like a gay advocacy group
Oh, wow.
for queer midshipmen and cadets to go to. And they even like sent us to the Outserve SLDN gay military conference when it was in Disney World. So it was like a pretty it there were a lot of efforts made to support queer students. And of course, like kids are going to be kids, so like if people are going to be rude or homophobic or whatever, that's something that everyone has to deal with no matter where you are. But like as an institution, it's not necessarily the worst. It's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and do you find that there's always the stereotype about the Navy being such a homoerotic place? I mean, it sounds like what you're saying. The Marines are pretty. I mean, I feel like most military branches, from what I've heard from those who've served. I mean, did you serve, Joe?
No. So the Merchant Marine is different than the Marines. So
Okay.
it's more affiliated with the Navy. So basically, I became a marine engineer. So I worked on like container ships, cruise ships,
Oh,
and I
wow.
did most of my career on a research vessel. And then I was in the Navy Reserve. So I never did any like active duty time.
Okay. So I didn't know that the Merchant Marine then has this affiliation with the Navy.
Yeah, so there's like a special part of the Navy Reserve that is all. It's called the Strategic Sea Lift Officer Program.
Okay, yeah. So these are pretty brainy, whiz-like um students at the Merchant Marine Academy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rigorous course of study. Like you go to sea for a full year broken up and you fit like a 4 or 5 year curriculum into essentially 3 years on campus. So it's a pretty intense
Yeah.
environment.
But it makes sense why it's on the Long Island Sound. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Because I think there's also in the Bronx, in
Yeah,
Throgsneck, I thought
so
there was
SUNY
also an
Maritime.
academy.
Yeah,
The
SUNY Maritime.
Maritime.
That's the state
Yeah.
school. So we're right across the water from them. They're like right under the Throgsneck Bridge. So from Kings Point, you can see the Throgsneck and you can see SUNY Maritime. There's a
Uh,
little bit of a classic rivalry there, a little.
Yeah, a very nuanced rivalry that people
Yeah.
who aren't in the in group don't know about.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like such a specialized world. But no, thank you for all that. Okay, so Joe was watching this in 2012 in your bedroom. And then how long has it been since you actually returned to it? Not until you're here now on the podcast.
Yeah, I just started rewatching it like last month. So that's the first time I've really dived back in.
Okay, so it's been 11 years. Um, okay, so we'll go through, you know, and I'm sure all of your poetic magic and voice and mariner voice will come through in this episode, but we go right away into um like Michael, they're all at the diner and where his mom Debbie works, and they're all talking about their hookups from Saturday night. And I mean, what did you think about? I always just find it so interesting, like the group of men, Michael, Brian, and Emmett, they tend to be our Greek chorus. Like they're always just like setting the scene every episode at the beginning. And it's like Michael had a guy with beach parasites, which just sounded awful. I'm
Yeah.
like there's parasites in his anus. Like I don't really, it was making me squirm. And I'm not sure um why that guy even wanted to hook up with Michael if he had parasites inside him.
It almost sounds unreal. What I find about so many scenarios in this show is that like they all, especially early on, like because this is still so early, episode 4,
Mhm.
um, like we're still getting to know the characters and getting to know this world that they live inside, and we just are presented like nonstop with so many like fantasy based, almost unbelievable scenarios. And like that's kind of what I got from this diner scene. Like they're looking back on their weekend, they're like regrouping, and they're like, oh, look at this like absurd situation I was in. I was in a dungeon with an undertaker. I was with the perfect man, and then it turns out that he wasn't so perfect after all. And it's just like it just like really quick bursts of that right to begin the episode, and then it's like Debbie comes and is like, shouldn't you guys be at the hospital? It's like, damn, right back to reality. So it's like right
Yeah.
away this juxtaposition of like the fantasy and the reality of this
You're
queer world.
right. I am here with the co-owner of one of my favorite stores here in Port Jefferson Village, New York. It is called the Soapbox. So Janine said, Andrew, I have these 4 products you need to get your hands on. It's called 4 for Fall. So she's going to go over these 4 products. I know first you have a soap for me. What is the soap?
Do. I have the soap for you. It is called Apple Cider Shea Butter Soap. It's by a company called Greenwich Bay. And this is a great soap because you can use it for your hands or your body. And it has a delicious apple cider scent. And I think you're actually already familiar with it.
Yes, it is
Tried
in
it.
my shower. I still have it. It lasts a very long
Yeah,
time.
great lather.
The lather's wonderful.
Mhm.
It's just so luxurious, and I love the scent into November.
Yes,
This
it
apple
carries.
cider just it evokes so many cozy feelings.
So,
After the soap, we have something that you can add on to
yes,
in the shower. So what is this?
this is a wonderful, wonderful exfoliating shower scrub. It is by a company called Primal Almonds, and it's a sugar whip shower scrub. And the scent is pumpkin spice. It's a moisturizing sugar scrub. So it's tiny little sugar granules, and it's something that you would use after you shower twice a week because you don't want to strip your skin of your natural oils and your moisture. But it's wonderful. It just really exfoliates all that dead skin and leaves your skin very smooth and soft from all the sugar.
So after I use the exfoliant, right now we need to moisturize. So
Yes,
I know you have a really nice fall body lotion for us.
absolutely. This is just such a delicious scent. This is one of my favorites for fall. The scent is Orchard Breeze, and it's by a company called Michelle Design Works. This is another product that you can use hand and body. It's great. You can place it on your vanity, just a couple of pumps for your hands, or use it on your entire body. But it's shea butter based, so it's extremely moisturizing. It's just wonderful, and the scent is just lovely.
We need something more deep for our face. Everyone wants face masks, and I know that you absolutely love this company and this brand.
This is one of my favorite masks by one of my favorite companies that we carry and we support. The company is called Farmhouse Fresh, and they're right out of Texas. The mask is called Splendid Dirt, and it's a nutrient-rich mud mask. It consists of pumpkin puree, and the benefits of this mask, it's a pore minimizer, a radiance booster, and a skin degunker. So it's an all-around great mask if you really want a boost of radiance. It brightens your skin and it really cleanses your pores.
If they live on Long Island or near Long Island, what is your address for them to come into the store?
We're located at 18 Chandler Square in Port Jefferson, New York, right in the village. And if you can't make it, you have to come in because we just have so much fun stuff in here, so many wonderful products. But if you can't make it in, please give us a call. We're more than happy to ship any of these wonderful products to you. Call us at 631-509-1424. You could always reach us on Instagram at the Soapbox NY, or you could always check us out on our website, Soapbox NY. And
Yeah, there's
I
so
think
many
that's
ways to
about it. Yeah,
access your
so many
products.
ways to reach us.
And Janine is more than happy, and Mariana, the
Oh,
other co-owner,
my mom, actually.
yes,
Yes, my mother.
are so willing to take your orders
Yes.
via phone, via Instagram, and I can't wait for everyone else to enjoy these luxurious products. Imagine that you're riding the Turner Classic Movie Great Movie Ride in Hollywood Studios. It's in the 1990s. As you're journeying through the Great Movie Ride, you pass the Wizard of Oz, where all of a sudden you see the Wicked Witch of the West ascend into Munchkinland in a cloud of smoke and flames. Well, that's the memory I have with the Great Movie Ride in classic cinema when I was at Disney in the 1990s as a young boy. And ever since that, I was hooked on classic cinema. Well, my friend Christian Garcia, friend of the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, has a podcast that you all are going to love. It's called That Old Gay Classic Cinema, and he looks at queer themes in classic cinema like Vertigo, The Wizard of Oz, Sleeping Beauty, Mary Poppins, 101 Dalmatians, Hello Dolly. The list can go on and on and on. So follow him on Instagram at That Old Gay Classic Cinema. You can listen to his podcast on Apple and Spotify. And he also is on the premiere episode of our Queer as Folk podcast, where I'm rewatching every episode of Queer as Folk from 2000. And the episodes come out bi-weekly. So make sure you listen to his episode with me. And he's launching a rewatch show of Smash, where they're putting on a Marilyn Monroe musical. So he's going to be joined by co-hosts, a lot who are in the Broadway and theater industry, and I'm going to be on his first episode. So without further ado, get listening to That Old Gay Classic Cinema. Enjoy. Yeah, no, it's such a good point, Joe, because we really are like between the utopic world of like queer male sex all the time, and then no, this is actually their reality. I mean, Brian is the one who has the most realistic scenario. He was hooking up with Justin again, and right, we get another photo, or not photo, we get another shot of Gail Harold's beautiful butt.
Mhm.
And he's with Justin, but of course, the most realistic scenario isn't even discussed. Like, why do you think he's so unwilling to talk about how many times he's been with Justin?
I think we'll get some more hints about that later in the episode because it has a lot to do with Brian's self-identity and also like the difference between what he wants and what other people want from him and what he's able to give. And he's kind of like having this crisis, which I think it comes down to his self-identity, and he doesn't want to deal with that and that crisis that he's having, so he just kind of ignores it.
Yeah, no, I agree. So okay. That's basically all we get at the beginning. I mean, I do love that Emmett's hookup. There's like a leather play happening, but then like the most, like you said, to even just shock the viewer. I think, like you're saying, they're really just trying to do a shock value at the beginning. Like, it's not the BDSM culture that's shocking, like the leather culture, which a lot of viewers, especially if they're straight, would like that would be so enticing to them. It's like, oh no, he's an undertaker, like he's a funeral director, or
Mhm.
has some element in that world. It's like, no, not that he is about to do bondage with a couple in the morning. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, those scenarios are always so fascinating. Um, okay, so then we like get thrown back into a hospital. Like you said, we're in reality. And I found the scene with Margaret Schmidt, Ted's mother, to
Mhm.
be a really well done, layered discussion, I thought. Like it really was giving us a lot of humanity in her character and her relationship with her son. You know, what did you think when she's introduced to her son's like gay male friend group?
It was interesting because it was like she knew that there were these elements to Ted's life, but she never had to personally confront it or interact with it in any way. Which it kind of one thing that she said, loving someone's not the same as knowing them. Like
Mm.
she kind of has to deal with that in so many ways, which is really intense.
And did you agree with her? I thought one of the most heart or gut wrenching moments is when she turns to Michael and says, like, if my son was straight, um, would a woman have left him in this drug induced coma state? Like, and not have called the ambulance? You
Mhm.
know, did you like, because I can really understand where she's coming from. It's because it didn't read to me as homophobic. It was more like men are not looking out for other men, is what I thought she was implying. Um, in this sexual attitude she has. I mean, what did you think was going on with her framing of that?
I mean, I thought it was interesting because I've watched ahead, so I know some things that aren't revealed in this episode. So I think it's interesting that that's her assumption that he
Mhm.
was just left. Um, and I also think it's interesting that that's what the viewer is led to believe, that
Mm.
Ted was just left for dead. And that it's kind of like this supposedly this supposed drug addicted character that we don't know that much about yet, who all we know is had this encounter and then supposedly left Ted for dead. Because it seems like it's not only just dumping on men, it's like specifically portraying an archetype of this like negligent drug addict who
Mm.
would do this horrible thing. And that's what is set up for us in this episode. So it's kind of intense because that's an assumption that a lot of people have about the queer world or about the
Mhm.
gay world in specific, that like it's all about partying, it's all about drug use, it's all about seeking pleasure. And then the consequences of that are just ignored. And that's an assumption that a lot of viewers maybe would bring to the table, just like Ted's mom did.
Well, and just like me, where we connect so much, Joe, is this is why everyone needs to follow your Instagram. Joe, like myself, we love to film ourselves in nature, reading evocatively. I mean, Joe's mostly reading, you know, um, Z Zone poetry. See, I got it, Joe. Um, reading um like poetry you've actually written. I like to read, well, you also read other poems that have been published. That's not true. Um, and I like to read poetry in the wild and literature. And I feel that we are really emotively connected. Um, but I guess I don't know why it's bothering me in this episode, or maybe it's that stereotype, like you've said, not only about drugs, but I feel like there's a statement here about men not being in touch with feelings. Like
Mhm.
that connects to Brian. I feel like men and their feelings is the theme in this episode. Like men and their feelings, and coming out and a mother's response to coming out. It's like you have Margaret Schmidt, Debbie, Michael's mom, and then Mrs. Taylor, Jennifer is her name. So like you have all the mothers. So it's like the mothers and then how the men connect to each other emotionally. And I feel like each man has a really different layer of emotions. Like we're even though Margaret, like you said, we're led to believe that a drug addict stereotype left Ted for dead. We don't nothing is that stereotypically presented to us with the men and their actual connection to feeling. And I think for me, that is something really unique in this show because a lot of the times in like cable television or just network TV, I feel we do get more of the portrayal of, especially with straight men, like they're one dimensional. Like you don't have multifaceted ways of how they relate. Like, even when you're creating your poetry, Joe, how do you feel you're emotionally tapping into the words that you put on the page? Like that process that you go through? Like, is it painful? Like, does it take a lot out of you energetically?
It can. It depends on what emotion you're trying to express or, what emotions you're dealing with. And I mean, like, in this episodes, there's a lot of like fear
Mhm.
and a little bit of hope, but you got to like find that hope. And then there's vulnerability. And those are all really difficult emotions to connect with for anyone, whether you're trying to create something with it or you're just trying to like communicate with the people that you love. So, yeah, I think it can be draining and it can be difficult to communicate those emotions, which we see with a lot of the characters interacting in this episode.
Yeah. And we also get the most literary episode where we actually have a lot of books that are discussed. Like, first, we have The Great Gatsby and this whole F. Scott Fitzgerald. So now we're in Justin's classroom. And oh, wait, that's right before. Well, I have to know, what did you think of Justin's mom, Jennifer Taylor, finding his erotic sketchbook of like men in their butts in the locker room? And it looked like Tom of Finland kind of
Yeah, they
images,
were
but
excellent drawings. That's impressive.
yeah.
Um, what really struck me was Brian written over and over in like different block letters. I really identified with that because I've definitely done that.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
no, me too. Actually, well, no, you go in your fantasy realm, how you had done that with like just men you were interested in or like people you were interested in. Like, how did you identify with the block letters?
no, so like when I was having my first experience, it was with a guy who was a little bit older, and I was, a little obsessed with him, and I would like write his name in my notebook. So I definitely understand that like youthful
Hmm.
infatuation that like needs to be written down or documented. Because like even as it's interesting, because even as he's like looking around at other male bodies and like drawing that form, he's still like you flip the page and it's like, nope, it's actually just about Brian.
Yeah, well, and I love that those moments are shown because again, I'm sure there are uh straight men who write down women's names or like and I feel like we just don't see it in media a lot because it is vulnerable. Like, right, you being, I mean, some might think you're obsessed, but I think there's more to it. It's not an obsession, it's more a connection, right? I mean, I didn't really do the block letter writing, but like I'll put myself out there because that's what I do on the show anyway. Um, I have to give a lot for you to feel comfortable, Joe. But I'll take one for the team. No, so I don't know if you've ever done this, but like with a lover or just someone you're really infatuated with, like as I'm going to sleep or I wake up, like I pretend that that lover's with me
Mhm.
and I'll say his name and like whisper it and just imagine that connection of them cuddling. Like I like to have that kind of fantasy. And I think we all create these romantic fantasies in our lives. So I love that you brought us to that Brian is just written over and over. And I mean, how do you think his mom is feeling in that moment when she sees the sketchbook? Because she loves that he's an artist, which I think is already unusual. Like, she loves that he's an artist, her son.
Yeah, I don't think she's upset. I think that she is curious and she wants to handle it with care, and she wants to connect with her son, and she wants to know what he's going through, but also express that she has relatable experiences. So I think when she first sees that, she's just kind of like, oh crap, I have to deal with this. But she comes from a good place and she wants to deal with it the right way. Like it's not like an angry place, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I agree. She's very measured, I feel. Like you said, she wants to investigate. I feel like
Mhm.
she's a detective in this episode. Um, but do you have anything else to say before we head to the classroom where um I feel we're getting really in touch with homoerotic slash um awakenings, the high school
Yeah,
awakening.
yeah, we should just get to the classroom because I mean, as I was saying earlier about like the fantasy aspect or like these fantastical situations, like being in the classroom and talking about F. Scott Fitzgerald and then what happens after that, that for me totally, at this point in the series, felt totally in that realm. So that's going to be
Mm.
exciting to talk about.
Yeah, so the English teacher, they're all discussing The Great Gatsby in this private school. Um, and Justin, of course, is drawing. And it's like another, now it's almost as if it's Michelangelo or Caravaggio, like the Renaissance buttocks and just muscular, the sinews of every muscle of the man. Um, and I mean, Justin is incredibly talented. Whoever's did these drawings
Mhm.
for Randy Harrison, who's the actor. But Daphne is like loving it. I just love Daphne's relationship with Justin. But yeah, so the whole theme is about yearning, and not a coincidence with the Great Gatsby. And I mean, you being at the Merchant Marine Academy, that was like, who even knew that you were so fit for this episode? Because that was West Egg was
Yeah.
supposed to be Great Neck.
So there's
Um,
Gatsby Lane
yeah,
right in the neighborhood.
yeah. Oh, so there's a name like Gatsby's a street, or
Yeah, there's like a Great Gatsby house in Gatsby Lane and stuff.
yeah. Well, F. Scott Fitzgerald lived right in Great Neck. Like you can actually visit his house. I've taken students there on like a um field trip. Um, but yeah. And I'm sure the private owners, well, they probably hopefully they knew that they bought F. Scott Fitzgerald's house. If not, I'm only like just going around. It's a beautiful neighborhood. It's right near the train. Okay. But I think what's so interesting is that of course Justin's in a daydream state. And then has to give the answer to what yearning means. And is like the teacher, I think he thinks that he's gonna punish Justin for catching him and talking, but Justin has this beautiful way of framing what yearning is. Like, do you remember, Joe, what Justin's response is?
Yeah, it's when you want something so bad it hurts.
Yeah. I
That's
mean, do you think that's a good definition?
well, as a poet, I do actually yearn quite a bit. So when you're talking about trying to connect with emotions that are painful to write down, most of that for me has been yearning. So I agree that when you want something so bad it hurts, that is a pretty good definition of yearning, but there's other ones. But I agree. I think it's a good assessment.
Well, and like, what do you think they're talking about in The Great Gatsby? Like, who's yearning for who in this moment?
In The Great Gatsby or in the show?
Well, no, in The Great like, do you think that it's just the um standard lesson about the green light and Jay yearning for Daisy and we're about to have a musical on Broadway probably soon. So the Great
Oh,
Gatsby, I have a Great Gatsby bag, like a handmade bag that I got in a farmer's market in the Hudson River Valley, well, in Tarrytown. Um, I can't wait to bring it out. More, I'm a huge Great Gatsby fan. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is
I
interesting, I find, what they're doing here. Or is it Nick? Is it Nick yearning for Jay? And is it the homoerotic interpretation that, I mean, I feel
I
like there's a lot going on.
I think it boils down to in the is it Boz Lerman, his movie, the song by Lana that's used in there.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Will you still love me when I'm no longer young and beautiful? I think it's kind of like longing for this again, like this fantastic fantasy-based idea of this like male connection
Mhm.
of like pure pleasure and being able to make that a reality when even just for a moment, when even afterwards you're going to return to the real world and it's not going to be there anymore. And Justin sitting there like longing for this football player, yearning for him, sorry, difference, yearning, not longing, and wants to have this moment of connection with him that the structures of the school and the whatever society say like they can't have.
Mhm.
um but it's more of I think he's yearning more for the idea because he's not yearning for this actual person. He's yearning for the idea of this person. If he's yearning for a person, he's yearning for Brian, but he has Brian. So it's like in addition to having Brian, he's just longing and wanting this connection with the people around him.
Mm.
uh, that's what I think it's about. And like there's lust and there's other emotions mixed in, but I think what Justin really wants in this scene is to like tap into this idea of what it means to have this camaraderie and this like young youthful male connection.
Yeah, well, and Chris Hobbs is accused of having a testosterone outburst, which I don't think I've ever heard a teacher say that, which is just an interesting phrase. Um, but Chris, like when he hears Justin's the way that that actor looks at Justin, I thought did a great job in like hearing the definition of yearning. So then what does the football player do? What does he do? But he touches his friend, who's another guy, as if that's a physical symptom of yearning is like to touch each other. I was like, oh, they're really playing around with the football players, like almost slapping each other on the ass, but not because they're in the classroom setting.
Mhm.
Um, but I kind of want to follow up because I think what you're saying, Joe, is so evocative of like, can Justin be yearning both for Brian and for the football player in this moment? Because I kind of saw it as both. Like, I see what you're saying of the fantasy of a football player, but like yearning for Brian to actually accept him as a boyfriend, which Brian is still refusing to like identify their relationship. I mean,
Mhm.
but is that longing? Because like you said, there's a difference. And I'm like curious, what is the difference you think between longing and yearning?
Longing doesn't have to hurt. Yearning is when it hurts.
Do you think Justin is hurt by Brian yet?
No, I think that he's gotten everything that he wants from Brian.
Yeah, that's
And he
true.
has
We
no he expects, as he says later, he expects to get treated a certain way by Brian and receive certain attention. And I think he, up to this point, has gotten everything that he wants from Brian.
Yeah. So you think Brian is facing more of a crisis in his relationship with Justin than Justin's facing a crisis? Because this is Justin's first love, really, is Brian. Like
Yeah.
Brian's been with a lot of guys. Um, and things are changing for him with Justin in how he identifies. Um, huh. Interesting. Okay. You're helping me. This is why I love these conversations, Joe. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what's happening here. But okay, well, so Chris Hobbs, we have to get back to that. First, like you at the Merchant Marine Academy, did you see a lot of male touch? Like sanctioned touch? Like was there a lot of that kind of camaraderie? Like just slapping each other on the shoulder, like hugging each other? Like was touch a big part of bonding?
I mean, definitely within some of the sports teams. So
Mhm.
like Kings Point has like a big rugby team, which there's a lot of touch going on there. Um, yeah, I'm not really too sure because I wasn't really a part of that. I didn't really have that much um of that aspect with other like with male midshipmen when I was a midshipman. I was much more of the yearner. So my closest male friend when I started there, I would just go to his room and like lay on his dresser and just like be really dramatic, melodramatic, and like yearning and stuff. And then he ended up leaving the school, and I saw him a few years later when me and my other friend Diane drove there to go to Hershey Park where he lived. And it like came as news to him that I was queer. Like he had no expectation of me being queer, which I thought everyone just assumed that I came across that way. So it was interesting for me to have this like experience where I would be like laying in somebody's room, like longing for them and having this like intense emotional experience with them. And then they would like not just assume that I was straight. Um,
Mm.
but I had less of like a touch and feel. I'm not a very physical person with most people. So I didn't have that experience, but I'm sure many other people did. I just wasn't privy to it.
Yeah. See, I feel like with my male friends, it's always like I'm a hugger, but like there's the fist bump, there's like the hug on with the shoulder, like, and you just slap their shoulder. Like, I do think there's a lot of different ways of like touching your male friends because you're not quite sure what's going to be comfortable. We're like, when I'm with my girlfriends, we'll hug all the time usually. So, um, but yeah, I mean, let's get right to the scene, which is we get I mean, I know that Brian becomes Ted's benefactor of his estate, which it's going to come up again, so we can touch it upon that then. But we get the infamous, I think one of the most iconic scenes in Queer as Folk is this moment where Justin decides to after do the after school detention on his own. Like he's like, yeah, I'll do after school detention without even being asked to with Chris Hobbs. And I'm like, okay. And like Chris is actually really like we already were teed up for it. Chris looks at Justin in a really admiring way in their classroom. But what do you think of the story that Chris is revealing to Justin? Like to kind of break the ice with him.
I mean, it reminded me of what I mean, I've never heard a story like I mean, I've heard a few stories like that from people like in male environments, but like it reminded me of like locker room talk
Mhm.
and like how straight identifying men like maybe are able to share these kinds of like maybe even like exaggerated sexual encounters as a way of like connecting with each other.
Mm.
um that's what it made me think of. How about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, um, well, first, he's like, oh, you wouldn't believe that this girl at this high school, um, well, like I'll just say it. Even though I don't know this fictional girl and I would never call her this, but he's like, oh yeah, she was a whore. And I'm like, and then Justin, as like I've brought up on every episode, Joe, the way that Justin sees lesbian women or just sees queer women. Um, the way queer women are viewed in this show, there's always a pejorative used with the men. And it's like, oh, I thought she was a dyke. And Chris says, no, 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 she's a whore. I don't know. There's something really interesting. But again, like you said, are they putting down a woman who is free with her sexuality Like they're putting her down to get closer together. Because it seems
Mhm.
like that's what they're doing to try to bond.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, do you like you've said, you call that locker room talk. I agree. Like there is a lot of conversations I've heard when it's like, mostly a male identifying group where they will put down women, even though they don't like personally, a lot of them don't believe in
Mhm.
putting down women, but they do it like they'll put down a woman sexually to score brownie points. Like, is that what Chris is doing?
Maybe, but also like if you think about the beginning of the episode where the queer men are sitting around in one of their spaces in the queer diner, and they're talking about their sexual encounters in kind of a similar exaggerated way, but they're not putting anyone down. So I
That's
don't
true.
know.
There's a difference.
It's kind of like a mirror where it's kind of like there's this more violent edge to the way that Chris Hobbs is talking about it than the way these adult queer men, again, because
Yeah.
this is a child who is not mature, and that plays a role too. And then it's kind of scary, but
Yeah.
this
Well, no, but do you think that's also because Chris is he's trying to prove himself to Justin or any guy he talks to? Like, oh, of course I had sex with her. Like, as if they would question him. Like these adult queer men, they're not questioning how much sex each other is having. Like it's kind of more scandalous story after scandalous story, but not like, wait, how many notches do you have on your bedpost? Like that's not, I mean, of course they might do it eventually in the series. I'm sure they will. But like then we get Chris actually talking about how this um girl came over to his house
Mhm.
and how she responded when he told her a journalist. She's a journalist for the school newspaper and she came to his house, which doesn't seem unethical at all. To be a journalist to go over to someone's house in high school. It sounds like Mean Girls. Remember, have you seen Mean Girls?
Yeah.
Okay. You remember when Katie is tutoring Aaron in, I think it's his house, but like that's when the kiss happens and he's dating Regina at that time. It reminds me of like a scene like that.
Mhm.
Um, but right, what did you think of how Chris responds when he asks him what a touchdown is like? It was it was like such a vintage way of thinking about American football. Like, because he scored a touchdown, like then she's sexually interested in him. Well, and then he gets hard. Wait, so that's where I'm just like trying to unpack this, Joe. Does he get hard because he scored a touchdown or because he's with this female journalist?
I don't know. Like that, all of that kind of happened in like one sentence. He was just like, I tell her what a touchdown is like, and then he starts talking about her rings and stuff. But I don't know. I don't know why anyone does anything. I don't know what's causing him to feel that arousal, but I think Justin is what is making him feel something in that moment because it was a pretty intense scene to be watching, a little graphic, but
Yeah. Well, so what's the graphic part? Just like how Justin, well, that's where I'm like, is Chris, I think we are led to believe, is Chris, did this even happen? Like, this could just be a fake concocted story for Chris to experience this with Justin. Like, hey, I'm going to create a fantasy in my head about what a high school girl would do in my house.
Mhm.
And I'm going to get hard. And then Justin, like, just says, oh, you're hard. And Chris
Well,
doesn't even respond.
the story is kind of like, and I got all worked up, and then she
Mm,
had to leave. And then
yeah.
Justin's like, well, I'm here and I have a B for Brian on my hand. What would Brian do?
Mm,
And he's able to give this attention to this classmate that he can't get anywhere else, but that he desperately wants, that he's yearning for this connection. And Justin's able to give that to him and then it's over, but then as soon as it's over, it's like interrupted by this authority figure,
Mm,
which when I was just rewatching it this morning and I was like, what if that authority figure hadn't come in right at that moment? Like, how would that change the way that this one scene impacts the rest of the series? Like, if that authority figure hadn't come in right at that one time,
mm.
and
Well,
this,
yeah.
yeah, if Chris Hobbs was able to just experience this like connection with Justin and this like queer pleasure, if he was able to just experience that without immediately having to feel shame and having that shame connected to this moment, like how different that would be for this character.
Oh, so you saw the teacher interrupting as a metaphor for Chris's shame that's going to start to permeate throughout the series. Like that he's not able to synthesize the moment, like talk through it with Justin.
Well, not even talk through it. It's not even a metaphor. Just like imagine you're doing this illicit thing that feels good, and then immediately there's shame attached to it. And
Mm,
that's your first time experiencing something like that. You're never going to be, it's going to take a lot of undoing that shame, which there's no incentive for Chris Hobbs to do that. He's just going to absorb the shame and leave it at that. And then have this negative feeling attached to what could have been a really beautiful thing forever, because he's not
that's
going to do
true.
it.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby, and I am so excited to be talking about Broadview Press. You might be asking, what is Broadview Press, Andrew? Broadview is an independent academic publisher in the humanities that produces high quality, pedagogically useful books for use in university and college classrooms. They publish in the humanities, mainly English studies, writing, philosophy, and history, just to name a few genres. And recently, I had on Dr. Jason Holt, who wrote all about the philosophy of sport. And what better summer episode than to talk about what happens when a philosopher dissects the beautiful aesthetics of sporting culture? In the spring, I had on doctors Kyle Stedman and Tanya Rodriguez to talk about what is sound writing, how to make audio projects in the college classroom, how to even have your students create podcasts. And then in the winter, I had on Dr. Jeffrey Weinstock. He talked about analyzing pop culture. Yes, I even sneak in some Real Housewives questions and how to teach composition and make it fun. He uses this whole metaphor about being a mad scientist in this gothic lab. And in the fall, I had on Dr. Ann Stevens, and she talked about literary theory and criticism. And yes, the university season is upon us. So, what better way to talk about the college classroom than to actually understand what is literary theory? That's a wonderful episode for all of you out there who teach literary studies. I love Broadview Press. Make sure you use their exclusive code. It's Ivory Tower on broadviewpress.com. You get 20% off all Broadview Press publications. Okay, until the next Broadview Press interview. And now back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. LGBT stories are universal, but each one speaks to the individual heart and soul of the writer telling it. Do you have a story to tell? Or have you been moved by an LGBT book, film, painting, television show, or other form of media? Then the Gay and Lesbian Review wants to hear from you. The GNLR believes in bringing awareness to queer art and artists through reviews, commentary, and thought pieces in which the author relates their personal lives to a particular piece of art, a novel, a movie. In addition to the print magazine, the GNLR also publishes articles on its blog. So you can see all of this on glreview.org. That's glreview.org. Remember, you get 50% off your subscription of the GL Review magazine when you use the promo code ITBR50. That's 50% off your print or digital subscription when you use promo code ITBR50. To learn more about submitting an article for the GNLR, visit their writer's guidelines. The link is located at the bottom of their homepage. And if you have any questions, email Stephen Hemrick. That's STEPHEN dot HEMRICK at glreview.org. The GNLR and its readers can't wait to see what you have to say. Yeah. I mean, I've had a few of these moments um with like I don't know if they still identify as straight, but with men who identified as straight. And like when you're on Justin's side, like I think a lot of us who are in the queer male community have probably had a moment like this where you're identifying with someone who hasn't experienced, like you said, queer pleasure. And it's that straight male fantasy, right? It's like there's so many porn categories about this with like the gay man who seduces the straight man, or like the straight man isn't getting the attention from a woman. So, like you said, like the story leaves off without a climax and the ejaculation doesn't happen. It's like, okay, Justin's going to be the substitute. Um, but I've also felt where a straight man was playing up being interested and then nothing ever physically happened, and it that angst, like that to me is yearning. It's like the yearning that never comes with a climax. So like
Mhm.
Justin did experience, he did give Chris a climax and an ejaculation, but you're right, there's now shame that Chris is, he's really going to battle with. And I don't want to spoil it, but things get really heightened and violent soon. Um, but yeah, I mean, I know we're gonna move from this scene, but I do think, would you agree that this is probably the most pivotal scene in terms of setting us up for the future of the show? Like, I guess with Justin's storyline.
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely because it has repercussions. Me and my boyfriend have been watching, so we are very many seasons in. So I
Yeah.
think this scene definitely sets up a lot of storylines that keep coming. So it's a really important scene.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything about straight men who you seduced, Joe?
I don't seduce anyone. People do what they want with their own imaginations. I'm not out here seducing, misleading. I'm not doing anything. People do that to themselves. That's all I got to say about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've never misled anyone, but yeah, if a straight man wanted to kiss me and make out, that's his prerogative. But again, I do have to say, like, from the queer experience, right? I'm sure you've heard so many stories of like heartbreak. Like sometimes thinking there could be more of a possibility, but
Mhm.
that man was just curious. Like it's okay to just be curious, but sometimes we long for more of a relationship, and a relationship wasn't going to happen romantically.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I'm pretty quick to the draw. As soon as it's appropriate for me to be asking certain questions, I ask them straight up, and then it becomes clear pretty quickly what people are interested in, and then I'm just moving on. So
Yeah.
that's how I
No,
deal with these straight identifying men who behave certain ways with me. I find out real quick and I let it go. That's not my job. Been there, done that. I'm not doing that anymore.
oh yeah, no. I have definitely moved on from the Andrew who was an undergrad. Like when I was an undergrad, 2012, like when you're watching this, I was also an undergrad. And like I experienced something with a friend who like brought me to his dorm. And then um, I'll be very anonymous about it, but let's just say he showed me his penis pump, and then like again did kind of a Chris Hobbs turn where he like told me about how he seduced a woman but she didn't please him, and then I was like, oh, this is my chance. Like I don't even know if I saw this scene from Queer as Folk, but we see it a lot, this kind of the straight and then the gay man like ready to take the lead. And um what was frustrating though is that I never actually had a physical moment. Like I was like, oh, this is my chance. And then, he was afraid. Like he was curious, but he didn't want to physically do something. And,
I mean, you
you
can't
know,
force it. I did see
no.
this YouTube video about this very subject. It was from like a gay YouTuber who like I don't remember what his name was, but it's like kind of like what Davey Wavy used to do, like
Oh
kind of
yeah.
like tutorials, but also like so the way to behave in like bathhouses or like how to handle a straight man who you want to hook up with that you think um is curious. And the piece of advice from this video I watched was like, you got to take it slow. You can't force anything. You can't bring it up. And I'm like, okay, that's too much work. I'm just going to go home. I will not be doing any of that. I'm not hand holding here.
Yeah. Well, and what I learned from that experience was like the pain, like what I was feeling as pain emotionally was not worth me continuing to be around a person like this.
Mhm.
Like to be
Oh,
clear with him and just say, this is how I feel, and I just can't continue you flirting with me like this. And he's like, but I love to flirt with my gay guys. He's like, I love having gay guy friends to flirt with. And I'm like, yeah, but it felt like I was being led on. And I had to
mhm.
create a boundary. So that's why I'm just so open and authentic with my straight guy friends. And I'm like, I am who I am, and we're gonna like have a conversation. And I don't try to look for things sexually with them.
Yeah.
You know, I have my queer male community for things like that. Okay. So moving from that experience. But like, you know, as we're nearing the end, we have another steam room scene. I feel like the steam room is always
Mhm.
like that's their uh cafe of sorts. Like when they're not in the diner, they're actually in the steam room, and there's always going to be some kind of male nudity in the steam room. Like always a nice butt. Um and you know, do you feel like this is actually an accurate representation, the way that Brian gathers with Michael always in the steam room?
Um, I don't know. I don't know if they're always in the steam room though, because they're in the gym. They go to the gym
Yeah.
together and then they go in the steam room afterwards. I think it's just coincidental. But so the gym that I go to, or that I used to go to, has a steam room. And I usually go there by myself, but sometimes I've like met a friend in there and we started chatting. But I mostly sit there and observe like the straight tech bros that come through. Um, and it's interesting to watch them interact, not like in a creepy sexual way, but like
Yeah.
to watch them like talk about these straight dude things. I'm like, wow. And I'm just like sitting in the corner, like sweating. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Um, so I mean, yeah, like the steam room is definitely a gathering place for many men. And um, I don't really go to like, I mean, there's a lot of queer people that go to that gym. Um, so I could definitely see that as a realistic representation of like where people just naturally congregate um, in a group setting. And it definitely doesn't hurt that that steam room in the show is really big and there's lots of people in it.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like it's still part of our fantasy world, because even if you're in the most like queer community, um d queer demographic, I still feel like the way that they're so free sexually is not like, and it's not a realistic representation of just like, oh yeah, he's hooking up with him in the steam room, that's happening. Like you
Mhm.
said, even in Seattle, there's going to be the straight tech bros. Like they're probably gonna have their eyebrows raised. Um,
Mhm.
if that happens in the steam room. But, you know, this is our like fantastic world of the steam room. Uh
Yeah. So actually somebody once brought me to a spa, like a a spa with all these baths and with different steam rooms and stuff. So that was an interesting experience because it was like everyone was completely nude, but it was like not that kind of stuff going on. It was just like a medicinal spa. Um, yeah,
yeah, yeah, no,
but
we
it's
have
definitely an exciting environment.
yeah, we have them in New York City. But I was gonna say, like, the only time I felt this charged, like where the like male homoeroticism is that apparent, is when I'm on Fire Island. Like, I think is the closest I can figure out a community that would operate in this kind of where you're having such a um heart-to-heart discussion, but then there's also just guys hooking up. And we even get that in Babylon. It's like they're having their everyday life conversations of obstacles, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm just gonna go to the back." And um, but yeah, so the spa you're talking about, that kind of experience is so amazing for self-care. Like that's why I love going to the Atlantic City spas, or New York City has some great spas. Yeah, spa culture is wonderful. Okay. So like as we get to the end, Mrs. Taylor, um, you know, she is going through he doesn't understand, I wrote, how her son, like she can tell her son is changing. Like Justin is starting to speak um bluntly to her. He's kind of adamant about not doing activities with them. And then we get that car scene. Like, how did you feel when she actually bluntly says, "Oh, and do you have any boyfriend, Justin?" as he's driving her?
Mm, I don't know. It was kind of leading up to it. And I mean, I think as the viewer, we kind of expected that. I think it blindsided Justin. So I don't know. I was just like, what's gonna happen? And then he just completely ran away, which I was like, okay, that makes sense. But it kind of was, I don't know. I don't think it was that intense. What did you feel when that was happening?
Yeah, I agree. I felt like what was more intense was when he is desperately banging on or ringing Brian's doorbell with Daphne. And like, I really think he thinks Brian, like, do you think he realistically believes that Brian is going to take him in? Like, in
I
that
think,
state of mind. Oh, so you think he does think Brian is going to save him from his
yeah,
childhood home?
100%. Like I said earlier, Brian has given him everything that he could dream of and that he's wanted, and he 100% expects Brian to just take him in. And
Yeah.
is he wrong? We haven't seen yet, but I don't know. We'll see what Brian is able to do for Justin.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good cliffhanger. So yeah, the last thing I feel, well, there's a dildo fight in Ted's apartment, which we don't have to get into analytically, but I felt like it was just a zany fight with um some humor. Even though Ted's in a coma, they're able to do a sword fight with his dildos. I don't know. That was an interesting moment. Um, so yeah, what was like something else, Joe, that like you like had to speak about the episode? Like you either wrote down or just um was on your mind that we haven't covered.
It was something that Brian said
Hmm.
when he was over. We haven't talked about Ted being literally in a coma at all.
Yeah, so yeah, what is like
So Ted is in a coma
happening?
and he gives Brian like he puts in his living will that Brian is the one who's gonna either pull the plug or not. And Brian's like, what the hell? Why would I be the one to do this? I don't want to do this. So he's kind of gone on this journey where he's like, what is my obligation? He asked Lindsay, like, how do we know we're alive? And she's like, maybe we know from what people expect from us. And it's
Hmm.
like, we have to give people things and we have to take care of them. And that's how we know that we are like really alive. So Brian goes back to the hospital and he's like over Ted's comatose body. And he's like, yes, I'll do it. I'll give you what you want and what you need. Which I think for Brian to say that, even in like the most sarcastic tone, is like a pivotal moment for him. Because he's like recognizing that he needs to give, that he's responsible and he's able to give these things to people that he cares about. And that's how you express that care, is by giving people what they need, even when you don't want to do it, and showing up. And then, then he brings Ted back to life.
Yeah, he brings Ted back to life by having sex with a nurse in the next bed.
Yeah, nosy Ted has to open his eyes, obviously. He's like, wait, I'm not gonna miss this.
Hi, this is Dr. Andrew Rimby, and I'm so excited to shout out the Gay and Lesbian Review, who is helping to sponsor the ITBR podcast. For all of you out there, the Gay and Lesbian Review is a bi monthly magazine where you can discover new things about gay and lesbian literature, history, and culture. And the GL Review publishes essays in a wide range of disciplines, as well as a slew of reviews of books, plays, and movies, and a number of special features, such as artist profiles and their popular art memo column. Each issue of the magazine brings you consistently intelligent, lively, thought provoking articles focused on a unifying theme. For example, their September October issue centers on the theme Cracking the Closet. So, starting in the 19th century, a number of artists and writers found ways to crack the closet by expressing their sexuality between the lines or in the interstices of their work. For example, Ignacio Darnad, who is a friend of the ITBR podcast, he's been on our show, writes all about illustrator J.C. Leyendecker, whose work for Ivory Soap and Arrow Collars gave him plenty of opportunities to draw pictures of well-dressed and at times scantily dressed American men. And you also can find an article by Vernon Rosario, who has been on the podcast, and he talks about the quest for sex in the Middle Ages. So, to subscribe, visit glreview.org. That's glreview.org. Click subscribe. So on their website, go all the way over to the right-hand side and you'll see the button subscribe. Click subscribe and enter the promo code ITBR50 because you're getting 50% off your subscription to the print or digital edition of the Gay and Lesbian Review magazine. I can't wait for you all to have your copy of the Gay and Lesbian Review magazine, and make sure that you take a picture when your magazine arrives or when you're reading it online and tag the GL Review on Instagram and ITBR, and we'll share it out in our stories. Enjoy your reading, everyone. Hi, everyone. Happy almost holiday season. Because the holidays are upon us, I'm sure so many of you out there are thinking, oh my, what am I going to get my friends, my family, my children, my romantic partner, my husband, my wife, any, significant person in your life? Look no further than my good friend Mandy Bengal, who makes handmade crocheted items. Her company is called Mandy Made It. You can follow her on Instagram at MANDEE Made It. And you will see all of these crocheted items that she's going to be able to customize for you, including special characters, sports team figures, even holiday items like a snowflake or a Christmas tree. So I have Mandy's keychains. I have the poison apple from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I have a rainbow flag that she made me. So Mandy is able to really customize an order just depending on what your hobbies and passions are, and what item you're really looking for. So because you're listening to me talk about Mandy, she said that anyone who goes to Mandy Made It on Instagram and orders from her, and they've heard the Ivory Tower Boiler Room ad, she will give you all a free Ivory Tower Boiler Room t-shirt with your order. So head right now to Mandy Made It. If you were really looking for that special gift, now you don't have to look any further because I have you covered with Mandy Made It. Okay, I hope you all enjoy your items from Mandy Made It. And please make sure that you take a photo of your crocheted items so that we can share it out on our social media. I know Mandy would love that, and I would love to see what you all are ordering from her. She even has an adorable pillow called Netflix and Chill, and she has these cute coasters that she crochets for your favorite coffee or tea mug. So enjoy all your Mandy Made It products. And then Ted says Jesus under his breath.
Mhm.
He's like, oh, Jesus. But you're right. That is such an important. Brian is so heartfelt. Like, I agree with you. He really has a transition when he says that with um Ted. Like, also seeing that there's a person outside of his own body. like that he can't only think about his own survival, right? Like I always think we're supposed to believe Brian is so narcissistic, but I feel like his mask keeps lowering. Like I never really see him as narcissistic. I just see him as in protection mode because there's a lot to his past that we don't know about yet. And um like I just remember Brian's look in his eyes when he says what you just read, but or yeah, recited about looking out for Ted's hair. Then he looks to sex. Again, I feel like he then is trying to solve the crises that he's going through, and then like the male body for him is a way as an outlet. Like, I don't know, is that what we're supposed to think with this nurse? Is oh, okay, I'm gonna have sex because I know how to do that emotionally.
Maybe. Or, I mean, when the universe gives you lemons, you make lemonade. There's a big
Yeah.
lemon right behind him. That was kind of a jump scare, though. Imagine you're like, okay, I'm really considering life or death. And then it's just like hunky nurse is like over your shoulder.
Yeah, it looked like a ghost. You're right. Could have
I
been a
would
horror movie.
scream. Yeah, like
That
to
was
just
scary.
boldly do that. I don't know. I don't know if Pittsburgh is that queer or at this time, like to in a mainstream hospital. Back to the fantasy, almost the unbelievable aspect of it, but good for Brian.
Yeah, well, I said Pittsburgh is kind of just used as this mecca of queer community. Like, I don't even think we're really supposed to put like our eggs in Pittsburgh's basket. Like, that's not really the realistic element here. Like you said. So, okay. And then how about our like final scene, which is well, it's not our final scene, but like our last major moment is Justin goes to Debbie's house and Michael's house.
Mhm.
Um, to look for community. And again, Michael is so as if he's a petulant teenager. He's so upset that Justin is in his house, even though like it's his mom's house.
Mhm.
Um, oh, with his also gay uncle, which becomes a really important figure as the season goes along. Yeah. What is Justin looking for? Like, do you think it's selfish of him to go to Michael's house?
No, I think,
Yeah.
well, what's he looking for? He's looking for Brian, and Brian didn't answer his door. So he's like, okay, how can I get a lead on where Brian is? So that's why he's going there, supposedly. But I think it is interesting. You pointed out at the beginning, like there's that through line of mothers in this episode. So he goes to like a mother figure
Mhm.
and a home. I think there's a lot of different homes. So like when Ted's mom goes to his home and that needs to be cleaned up,
Mhm.
or Justin at his home with his mother and with his father who is not so supportive. And then he goes to this other home, this like surrogate home, and then he ends up in Michael's like childhood bedroom. So it's interesting that you said he's like looking for community because he's looking for support. He's looking for some sort of home environment where he can feel safe.
Yeah. And of course, when Brian comes to the house, he hooks up with Justin. Um, and then Michael is so angry at Brian for hooking up in his bedroom. Like,
Mhm.
do you think that Michael, do you, or Brian has this look in his face once he's accused of hooking up with Justin and like being scolded at by Michael. Do you think Brian really knows how in love Michael is with him in this moment? Like that this is the source of Michael's jealousy in a way?
I mean, I thought it was interesting that it hones in on the pictures that Ted has of Michael in his condo. And then right when Justin goes into Michael's bedroom, the first thing that he hones in on is a picture of Michael and Brian. So it's kind of like set up to be a similar scenario where it's like this care, this like special friendship that I don't know if it I think it doesn't need to be like a romantic thing. And
Mhm.
I think it's just like a very special friendship and this camaraderie. And I think Brian does know. I think what's very special about their relationship is that they are on the same page. And then everyone else around them like makes assumptions that like, oh, Michael wants this from Brian, blah, blah, blah. And maybe that's true at times. But I think at the end of the day, Michael and Brian are on the same page about their special friendship.
Mhm.
And I mean, maybe like Justin coming in might be seen as a threat at this time. But I think Brian is 100% aware.
Yeah. Well, but you're so right. There's another um visual um through line happening with the queer men. Brian, we're back to the sketchbook, like continuing to write Justin's name. I mean, Justin's sketchbook, Justin continuing to write Brian's name and the yearning, right? There's like, I mean, longing and yearning. I think you're so right to say. Like, I think we're getting a mix of both feelings happening. But we have that reverberation. We have Michael encountering Ted, having all these photos of Michael, and there's a longing there. And then we have Michael with Brian's photos. The only one we don't have yet a visual of is who is Brian yearning for. And I'm not sure.
Does
I feel
Brian yearn? That's the question. Does Brian yearn?
does Brian yearn? I feel like that's a good ending
Oh,
for our next what's going to happen in the next episode. But also Debbie gives her P flag advice to Jennifer, and we'll see what Jennifer Taylor does with that advice. It seems like she's not on the same page as her husband. Justin's father is going to be you know, go through a more dramatic process. Maybe not dramatic, that's not the right word, but he has a different response to the news as the season goes on. So Joe, wow, I feel like we covered a lot in the episode. There was a lot there. And you know, how are you feeling revisiting Queer as Folk? Like, I love that you're watching this with your boyfriend. Like, what's one response you and your boyfriend keep having as you see each episode?
um, shock, awe. No, but I've been having a lot of emotional reactions. So obviously it like deals with a lot of pretty sensitive subjects and like even more universal themes like death and family and change, and like different dynamics
Mhm.
between different types of people. So I've been like, some episodes make me like get really angry, some episodes make me cry. I don't know, it's really fun, but it's interesting because my boyfriend had brought the show up like a few like before we'd started rewatching it. And I was like talking about like going out or something, and he's like, you can't do that. I know what happens to guys like you. I've seen Queer as Folk, and I just thought that was so funny. I texted my friend immediately. I was like, Charles just said this. But it's just interesting that after he said that, now we're like rewatching it. Because I don't know, it's interesting because it does touch on different aspects of like queer nightlife. And I've had people say to me like, "Oh, I don't want to be an out gay man because being gay is all about like partying and doing drugs, and like that's not what my life is about." Which the show does explore certain aspects of that, but at the same time it explores like the normal parts of queer life and like the normal struggles that are universal to everybody that queer people obviously go through as well. um so it's just exciting to get that opportunity because I mean, like, I identify with like the nightlife scenes too, but like it goes into a lot of different things. So it's really exciting. Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun rewatch.
And like the infatuation the crushing. To me, like this episode brought me back to my notebooks and the awakening of just, right? You can feel Justin's heightened state as a teenager. Like, oh yeah, that's what it was like when I was with my first, sexual encounter. Or wow, I thought this was going to be my partner forever. I mean, it is emotional. And like that's why, so many will ask me, "Oh, do you feel that this show is still relatable?" Or is it problematic? But I feel like it could be both. Like I said, it has slang words for queer women, which is just of its time. And you're like, huh? Like, why are they seeing women this way? There's something misogynistic happening. But at the same time, the emotional depth is still, of course, palpable. Like we feel this in our current lives. I mean, yeah, I think it's why I was so excited to bring you on, Joe, because I knew you were going to have a certain take poetically about yearning, and you did not disappoint. You're having me now think about what's longing, what's yearning, what's going on existentially in my life. Um,
Yeah, and to
but
this
yeah,
day, I have a Brian in mind. So I still exercise my yearning. It's a practice. You gotta do your abdominal crunches, get that longing in. It's
yeah,
important. Think about your
yeah,
personal Brian.
yeah. I will think about that on my walk outside today.
The
Like
best thing.
who my Brian is.
Who is your Brian? Do you know?
Do I know who my Brian is?
Like when you watch Queer as Folk, do you
Yeah.
have like a specific person or like a few people in mind that you're like, that's my Brian Kinney?
Yeah. Well, like when I was when I was um a teen, like when I had come out, like there was definitely more of that
Mhm.
yearning. Um, and when I was in college, there was the one who got away from me. But
Mhm.
I'm actually now like reconnecting to some men who I was friends with them, but had such um tense emotions around them when I was younger. And it's interesting coming back talking with them now because I feel I can see how much I've grown. And I'm like, oh, okay. I don't necessarily feel the heavy heartbeat when I was around them the same way, but I do feel that I'm looking now for more stability. Like I'm looking now at my life for groundedness with men and like entering a new phase. Like I feel like I'm in a huge transition right now romantically, Joe. So like the show is really exciting to rewatch because it feels very different as a register when I'm in my 30s, like early 30s. And I'm like, huh, I think I'm looking for a long-term relationship. And even though I
Mhm.
do like hooking up is exciting, but it's a different, what Brian is going through. I feel like now I'm more into Michael's state of mind. Like
Mhm.
I identify now more with Michael, even
Okay.
though I used to think I was wanting Brian's life. Like I do enjoy Brian's life, but I think I'm a mix of Brian and Michael. But hopefully I'm like more nuanced with
Yeah.
Michael's thinking. But yeah, Joe, where can everyone follow you again just to make sure they're all on your Instagram?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram and my main one is Rafflecopter McGee. That's where I post like poetry things. And yeah, you can find me there.
Oh, and TikTok, right?
Yeah, I'm on TikTok as Joe Nasta, and then my zine is Stone Pacific Zine. We just put out an issue 11, and there's a
Ooh.
new one coming out um in December. So
Oh, good. I'll
yeah,
put it in the show notes. Everyone can find it.
yeah,
Um, so exciting. Well, Joe, this has been wonderful. Tell your boyfriend hi from me, and that I hope you keep enjoying the show. Um, and hopefully you're not like, why did we get invested with this show that Andrew has recommended? No, no, I
no,
don't think
thank
anyone,
you. It's great because yeah, it's been great. So thanks for doing the podcast. Thanks for having me on.
of
And
course.
sharing Queer as Folk, getting people excited about it. It's good. It's
Yeah,
exciting.
maybe it's spicing up sex lives. Who knows?
I think it
Uh,
is. Yeah, you didn't hear it from me, but maybe it is.
Oh, as long as you don't get a beach parasite, because that sounds really scary.
No.
I'm gonna have nightmares about it. Okay, well, thanks, Joe, and bye to everyone out there. I can't wait to be back on with the next guest and getting into episode 5. It's like moving quickly. Okay, this has been great, Joe. Hi, this is Dr. Andrew Rimby. I want to thank you so much for listening to the ITBR and TCIA episodes. Make sure, if you don't, follow, rate, and review us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also, make sure you follow ITBR on TikTok and Instagram at Ivory Tower Boiler Room and TCIA on TikTok and Instagram at True Crime and Academia. Also, we have a brand new Patreon membership system. So I just want to explain it to you all quickly. So if you want to become an ITBR student, it is $5 a month. You get ad-free ITBR and TCIA episodes and video interviews. If you want to become an ITBR professor for $10 a month, you get all of those ad-free benefits, but you also get access to both the ITBR and TCIA book clubs. You can join both book clubs, get ad-free episodes, plus you're going to get all of our extra video episodes. So I am rewatching Queer as Folk. Christian Garcia from That Old Gay Classic Cinema is joining us, and he's rewatching Smash. Mary is going to start to rewatch shows as well. You even get access to what I'm calling the ITBR Teaches. So if I'm recapping a movie or a TV show, including Barbie, Halloween movies and horror films, you get access to that as well. And then I also am offering consultation services. So for $30, you get your first initial consultation with me. It's a 1 hour private Zoom. I will help create your podcast, your media brand. How do you navigate academia as an undergrad or a grad student? Do you need help with technology? It could be teaching tools, Spotify for podcasters, video editor software. Do you want to expand your social media presence as an artist, writer, podcaster, or academic? Do you want help on how to create a public humanities identity like I've created for myself? So I'm offering that consultation service. You can find more info about it on Patreon. And you also can join our book clubs. If you want to just join the ITBR book club or the TCIA book club, you can do that for $4 a month. Patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. That is patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Thanks to the team, Mary DePippi, our chief contributor. And thank you to our two new interns from Stony Brook University, Jonathan and Sarah. Bye, everyone. Until next time.